Chapter 181, Shuzhong. The carriage galloped out of the capital. The huge city gate behind him slowly closed in the golden sunset, and the night gradually soaked as it became farther away from the city, turning the sky into black, hiding the original prosperous sound, and making the sound of horses' hooves on the official road clear. Zhang Shui sat quietly in the car for a long time. In the end, he could not hold back, and opened the curtain of the car by the window, and looked behind. The bright lantern on the castle tower was getting farther and farther out of sight, slowly dimming, like the cold stars hanging sparsely in the night. She always thought that one day, the day when she finally left everything and left the capital, she should be as happy as a bird out of the cage. However, it backfired. Xie Wei's disappointed and resolute words at the time of parting were like a vicious curse, turning into a dark cloud, and a gust of wind kept hovering in her mind, enveloping her heart, driving it away, lingering. There is no real freedom under the sky. Even if you flee to the ends of the earth, as long as you have a bond in your heart. Trapped in a cage forever. What does he know? It's just to intimidate her, force her, and don't want her to leave the capital. Zhang Xuning retracted her gaze and slowly closed her eyes. She forcibly cleared her chaotic thoughts, and only counted the sound of the coachman waving the horsewhip in front of her, so that she could stop thinking about the extremely unexpected things that happened in Xie Wei's mansion. From the capital to Shudi, the road is long, a full 3,000 miles away. Although there are 300 miles of expedited, 600 miles expedited and even 800 miles expedited by the imperial court, you can run a trip in more than 10 days or even a few days, but although Zhang Xuning did not bring much salute, she also loaded a carriage, and brought Tang Erlian or 2 girls, as well as the guards in the house to ensure safety. Even if the horses are well chosen, they cannot be compared with the imperial court, so when the weather is good, traveling more than 100 miles a day is already considered to be the top of the sky. In summer, the days are long and the nights are short, which is suitable for walking. But there are many storms in the summer, and once the weather is not suitable, they have to stay at the post station or inn, or even stay in the village. Zhang Xuning was used to living a pampered life in the capital in her last life, but she was ruthless to go to Shu earlier, and it was inconvenient to eat and live all the way, so she forced herself to lose weight, which was quite a bit of a pinch. When we arrived at the edge of the Yellow River, we caught up with the flood. There are hungry people everywhere, and there are hungry people on the road. I don't know where many people from the heavenly sect came out, spreading rumors that the court was incompetent and unreasonable, saying that the emperor did not do well to cause natural disasters, and opened porridge sheds to give alms, but they held people's hearts in their hands. Zhang Xuning is not in the court, he is not an official. Even if he can't see such a tragic scene, he can't help so many victims, although he can see the heavenly sect's plan clearly, and he is worried. But when he looks back and thinks about the words spread by the heavenly sect, it really can't be regarded as a rumor, and Xie Wei is strategizing. Even the heavenly sect was wiped out in the previous life, and he wants to have his own insight into these things, and he doesn't need to be reminded by others. She was ruthless in the end and let the coachman continue to drive forward. Crossing the Yellow River, passing through Luoyang, crossing the Shu Road, to Chengdu, almost from the early summer to the early autumn, the scenery seen along the way has also changed from the reckless plain to the Weha Soup, the Shu Road natural danger, and finally is the Tianfu fertile field surrounded by the lofty mountains and mountains. Yu Fangyin had already received the news that she was coming to Shuzhong, and used her own money in advance to buy a house for her in Chengdu and Ziliajing, 1 permanent residence and 1 settlement, and calculated the time to arrive at the post station in Chengdu half a month in advance. When I saw Zhang Xuning get off the carriage, I almost didn't recognize anyone. Delicate and pale and full of servant dust, the fatigue of long days of running made her look much thinner than before, and the whole person even looked an indescribable sense of loneliness and depression, which almost made Yu Fangyan's tears fall at first sight. Ren Weizi was a little embarrassed and a little curious, standing in the distance, and didn't approach for a long time. Jiang Xuning laughed and helped Yu Fangyan, who saluted herself. Raising her eyes to look around, all the phonology is different from the capital, and the pedestrians who come and go speak the dialect of Shudi, except for Yu Fangyan, who came to greet her, are very strange everywhere, which makes her have a feeling of wandering in a foreign land. For a moment of trance, Xia Wei's words echoed in his ears again. But with that comes novelty and joy. She ignored the strange sadness and emptiness. In the next 2 years, Jiang Xuning hid in Ren's salt farm, and for her promise to Shen Zai, she expanded her business territory regardless of the consequences. In the second year, she had already secretly contacted Yan Lin. Jiang Xuning let herself have no time to think. She never wronged herself above the degree of food and clothing. Everyone below obeyed her, and no one above could control her, let alone those hypocritical and cumbersome entertainment. But even so, he still didn't dare to stop. She was afraid that once she stopped and had a moment of free time to think quietly, she would find that even if the choice to come to Shuzhong was not wrong, the 2-year-long defection was just a testament to how correct that person was.
News Note: Chasing the Past.
Chapter 182, Wei Liang's Doubts. Wei Liang opened the exquisite pocket watch bought from the Persian merchant for the third time, looked at the time. The scenery on the street outside was changing. 3,000 miles to the ground. It was mid-autumn. The cool breeze blew the leaves. The kumquat dotted the city, countless gentleness and prosperity. But he didn't have the heart to appreciate it, but he had a little uncontrollable apprehension. I'm about to meet that person. But he began to worry about whether he would bring some trouble to himself if he went too far this time. It all started last summer. At that time, Wei Liang was still studying at Yangzhou Shuangzhong Academy, although he was not the #1 talent in the world, but he was also famous in the Jiangnan region, and he was the favorite to compete for Xiaoyuan in the autumn of this year. Unexpectedly, when I was about to abandon the boat on a day trip to the lake, I met a strange girl. The body is thin and exquisite, wearing gold and silver, and the pearls hanging on the earlobes alone are worth thousands of taels of silver, but the goose yellow Hangzhou silk clothes are full of muddy water, as if they have just been fished out of the mud pit, and even the head and face are not spared. The face, in particular, seems to have been in a hurry to wipe the muddy water away, but it didn't work, and instead wiped the face even more. When she saw their group of students landing, she immediately greeted them. This group of people who are good friends with Wei Liang are all knowledgeable young talents, and there are many bold girls who will throw sachets and sweat towels when they take the initiative to meet the lake, and when they see a girl taking the initiative to meet them, they subconsciously think that they are taking the initiative to offer their hospitality, but they are so embarrassed or see you for the first time, and they stopped for a while. Although Wei Liang is famous, his appearance is only mediocre, and he is not very amazing. In the past, they were all peers, and they were quite popular. So at that time, he was only standing in the middle of the crowd, completely out of the way, waiting to see the follow-up. But no one expected that when the friend who was traveling with him asked which girl is looking for rather frivolously, the girl blinked, glanced at the place where he was standing, and said without being shy at all, I'm looking for Wei Liang Wei Gongzi. There was silence on the edge of the lake. Wei Liang himself was stunned, and he was really taken aback. Everyone else looked at him. The girl was still generous, obviously with such a dirty and indistinguishable face, and when she laughed, she actually gave people a bright illusion, and said to him, Master Wei, can you take a step to speak? Those friends who are traveling with them have always watched the excitement and didn't think it was a big deal, and deliberately booed and coaxed on the side. He immediately felt a little burning on his face. His feet remained motionless as if they were nailed to the ground, and he replied to the girl with a straight look, if the girl is looking for something, you might as well say it on the spot, and you don't need to borrow a step to speak. The girl's gaze was a little strange when she looked at him, her eyes rolled around, and she didn't know what she was thinking, and after a while, she raised her eyebrows. Do you really want me to say it here? Wei Liang's heart jumped, and he subconsciously said, there is nothing to say to others. She looked at him seriously, and repeated mysteriously, Wei Gongzi, you have thought about it, do you really want to say it here? At that moment, Wei Liang's mind flashed through 1,000 forms, and all kinds of self-doubts came out of his mind. After I went to Yangzhou to study, which girl did I feel ashamed of? Have I ever made a promise to a prostitute in the Qinglu fence but did not fulfill it? Did I pick up something inappropriate while walking on the road in the middle of the night and did not return it to the owner? Was I not cautious enough in my words and deeds in the academy to annoy anyone without knowing it? But the answer is no. Although his family is not rich, he is not poor, and he still has basic vision. One is not to do anything excessive, and even if he does, it will not leave an obvious handle. But this girl's posture. Didn't you miss something? The eyes of others fell on him, like a needle prick. Wei Liang was inexplicably nervous. He still didn't hold back the battle between heaven and man in his mind, coughed, and said uncertainly, then, take a step to speak. Later, he thought about this terrible decision several times, and it could be said that he had thrown his reputation away from the feet of others. What is there to avoid if you are not weak-hearted? Since then, it has been rumored that he has an unusual relationship with a mysterious girl, and he is often taken out to make fun of, and when he asks about it, he can't tell the reason, and he is unusually aggrieved. It's just that at that time, my brain didn't turn around, and I didn't realize the consequences of this move. But the girl smiled and bent over. At the end, he waved his hand to his other friends very naturally and said, the little girl and Wei Gongzi will go to talk first, and if you can't finish talking for a while, you sons don't have to wait for him. After that, I naturally sent him back to the college. The friends thought they were interested, and they laughed narrowly and walked away. The remnant sun paves the water, and the half of the lake is sorrowful. The willow branches on the shore had withered, so he was left to stand face to face with the girl whose face was not clear, and looked at each other. Wei Liang frowned and said, I don't seem to know the girl below. The girl put her hands behind her back and said, Wei Gongzi doesn't know me, but I have heard Wei Gongzi's name for a long time. Wei Liang was puzzled. The girl also loves to read. The girl shook her head. What I hate the most is reading, and I have some other hobbies lately. Wei Liang didn't know how to answer. The girl smiled at him. I heard that Wei Gongzi is also very good at studying this area, so today Tet came to ask for advice. Wei Liang finally didn't suppress the curiosity in his heart. This one. The corners of the girl's lips were pulled apart. Farming. Wei Liang. The moment he heard these two words, Wei Liang's eyelids almost jumped, and his scalp even went numb, and he had a shocking feeling that the deepest secret in his heart had been spied on. He was shocked. How do you know? Looking back on the scene now, it is actually a little unspeakably funny, but it is hard to deny, at least at that time, there was still some fear in his heart. It's not that he's afraid of being known, but he's afraid that his family will come to him for trouble. Shenong Industry and Commerce. Scholars are the highest, and the scholars are only for 10 years to jump over the dragon gate to become the master, and the bottom is the end of the agricultural business. The family of generations of poetry and books naturally does not look down on the following 3 grades. However, Wei Liang was different from others since he was a child, and when he saw rain in the sky and water dripping on the ground, he wanted to ask the truth, and he went to look through some astronomical almanac every day. When he saw working in the fields, watering the seeds, and sprouting seedlings, he wanted to find out, and when he entered the bookstore, he secretly bought a copy of Chi Min's techniques, and later, when others raised orchids in flower pots, he had a deep relationship with the Persians and the different races, and planted a kind of ugly thing in the blue and white porcelain pot. What is it called? When he was young, others still played around with him. When he was older, the elders in the family finally discovered his deviant nature, searched out all the almanacs and agricultural books, and burned them clean, and gave him a family law, saying that if he couldn't pass the exam, he would want him to look good. Wei Liang then lost his way back, and used this flexible brain back to the right road of reading, writing strategies, reading scriptures, and within a few years, he was considered to be worthy of his heart, and he became famous. After leaving home, he went to Yangzhou to study. No one cared about it in the Frost Bell Academy, so once he was free, he used a knife to draw on the dug potatoes, and roasted a few sweet potatoes for his friends to eat. Of course, after one of them had diarrhea, no one dared to eat his food again. It can be said that Wei Liang never expected that in this Yangzhou territory, someone would know that he actually doesn't like to read and prefers farming. The girl seemed to have expected him to be so surprised, and did not answer his question, but just looked at him with a smile and said, "If I say that there are thousands of acres of empty land right now, just waiting for someone to plant something, will Wei Gongzi be interested?" Wei Liang felt that she was talking nonsense. Where did a yellow-haired girl dare to say that there were thousands of acres of vacant land waiting to be planted? At that time, she almost didn't think about it and refused, but the girl did not say anything, and only handed him a name post, on which was written the address of the courtyard, saying that if he changed his mind, he could find it and wait for him at any time. So, Wei Liang couldn't resist this temptation after all. After returning to the academy, it only lasted 6 days, and then I couldn't help but follow the map and went to the annex. But I didn't see the girl again. Remaining in the courtyard to entertain her was another person with a delicate eye, who personally handed him a letter and several title deeds and account books, and took him to the so-called open space to inspect it himself. From then on, Wei Liang got on the thief ship and entered the thief's den. Merely. He had done a lot of things, he had taken a lot of money, and the harvest of rice this year was really gratifying, but he didn't know who he was doing, which really made him feel uneasy. Especially recently. The carriage has arrived at the boundary of Jinling. Outside, there is a lot of pedestrians, bustling and noisy, even when the sun is about to set, and there are sounds of soliciting business everywhere. There are even some people who don't come out to set up their stalls until this time. The river is full of lanterns. Outside the carriage, the coachman stopped to ask for directions. "Little brother, how do you get to Wei Lane?" Passers-by give directions to the driver. The stop was near the tea house, and I could faintly hear the sound of gossip coming from the second floor. Wei Liang listened intently for a moment and then frowned. "If you want me to say, there must be a fight between Wang Xiaojianren and the master of the circular machine. The heavenly sect is promoting Taoism, and the White Horse Temple must advocate Buddhism, and the quarrel has been quarreling for many months, and this is a proper fight. It must be the circular machine monk who is more powerful. Yes, the Holy Lord trusts him so much. I heard that even young Master Xia has been estranged in the past 2 years. If you want to count it, young Master Xia is the real emperor. He is a monk who came to the middle halfway, and he has no merit for the society and the people. How can he still be crowned a national teacher? Oh, don't you dare to talk nonsense. Alas, it's messy, it's messy. Fortunately, Totter has lived a lot in the past 2 years, and it has not caused chaos to the big cotters, otherwise this internal and external troubles will be on the verge of breaking out, and it will simply force our little people to death. If you want me to say, you want the heavenly sect to be powerful. What is Datong? The heavenly sect is for Datong. After a few families in our village have no land to plant, they can't become bandits, and they all join the heavenly sect. Aren't they all forced by dog officials and profiteers? Fortunately, our Jiangnan is a rich land, and the impact is not great. Don't you say that the emperor will tour south next year? But no, you said, where have so many rich businessmen and magnates come from in Jinling in the past half month, and there are BMW incense cars everywhere? Just for this. A trip to the south to work hard and hurt the people and money, and the dog officials don't want to pay for it, so can't they arrest these rich businessmen and magnates? I heard that they are looking for money, and whoever pays more money will give more salt to next year. The world is getting harder and harder. Who's to say it's not? The coachman asked where Wei Lane was, drove there, and gradually went farther away, and those voices were slowly blurred behind them, mixed with the sound of chariots and horses, and became blurred. Wei Liang lowered his eyes and touched his sleeve. This season's account book is quietly tucked inside, tied to the arm, firmly. The coachman said, "Master Wei, it's here." Wei Liang lifted the curtain and got out of the car. In the long old alleys of the south of the Yangtze River, moss grows in the cracks of the bluestone slabs, and a few golden autumn leaves from nowhere float on the ground. The courtyard in front of me is deserted, there is no half of luxury, not even a specific name and surname, there is only a black plaque on the top, and the words "A Bleak White Residence" are written on it. He stepped forward and clasped the knocker. Soon, someone answered the door. It was a fair-eyed maid. She was not surprised to see him, but her eyes showed a little scrupulousness, and she said lukewarmly, "Wei Gongzi is here. My master has been waiting for you here for a long time after you have been summoned. Please come in." It is not obvious from the outside, but it is quiet inside. There are several parrots hanging in the hallway. When he saw someone, he called, "Whoever is coming, who is coming?" Wei Liang was speechless. Walk all the way to the depths of the courtyard, pass through the double-hanging flower gate, and then enter a water pavilion near the lake. The beauty of the water pavilion leaned against the edge, set up a reclining chair, and placed a square table beside it, with a melon and fruit plate resting on it, and an open account book. Sitting on the chair was a girl. And instead of sitting upright normally, he sat cross-legged and looked lazy. There was only a red agate hairpin pinned to his black and shiny hair, facing the Pinghu Lake with his back to the water pavilion, and he looked at the fishing rod on the railing with his hand on his cheek, as if he was bored, waiting for the fish to take the bait. Wei Liang could only see half of her back from behind. For a while, I wasn't sure if it was the girl I saw last year. The maid who led the way said, "Girl, Wei Gongzi is here." The girl didn't look back. Take this girl's money, plant this girl's land, detain this girl's account book, press this girl's harvest, and dare to use this as a threat, and want to see me alive and die and ask what is going on. Wei Gongzi, now that the world is rampant with bandits, don't you worry about encountering some accidents on the road, and one accidentally dies. Wei Liang recognized it immediately when he heard this voice. Shallow and faint, like the wind passing through the airs, like a spring undercurrent, incomparably pleasing to the eye, making people reverie. He stood behind him, and naturally heard the dissatisfaction and threat hidden in these words, but he asked himself that he had never done anything unfortunate, and even in the face of jackals, he was not afraid, and replied with calmness, "At the request of the girl, I managed thousands of acres of fertile land, and the harvest was quite good. However, when the peasant households reported the harvest, the Tatars outside the Yanmen Pass were eyeing each other, and the heavenly sect was rampant in the hinterland of the Central Plains, so they had to be a little confused about the whereabouts of these grains. If it is said that it is put into the city and convenient for the people, it does not hurt. But if the girl has bad intentions and makes it used by the rebellious ministers and thieves to raise the army, it is Wei's sin." The figure of the woman in front of her suddenly stopped moving. Wei Liang got straight to the point, "So Wei came here just to ask a question, is the girl's ability to serve the heavenly sect?" "Serve the heavenly sect? Does she look like someone who is not afraid of death and dares to make peace with the heavenly sect?" The corners of the woman's mouth in front couldn't help twitching, and finally turned her head and looked at Wei Liang. Wei Gongzi is really dedicated to farming and ignoring the world. How can he even put such a ridiculous idea in his head? Just like in the previous life, only the land is farmed. In the future, Tan Hualang's brain, the article is done, and the land can be planted, but he can't go to the officialdom and fight to the death with others. She should have known that she shouldn't have had much hope for this man's brain. She turned her face with a hint of impatience on her face. On the goose egg-like cheeks, the snow skin is delicate and can be broken, and under the shadow of the sunset sun, it is plated with a layer of golden red, and the eyes are precipitated with the world in the past 2 years, and the agility adds a bit of stability. It's just that the corners of his lips are smiling, and he adds a little mockery to this boundless color. Wei Liang only saw her once last year. At that time, she was covered with mud. Where did she have such a radiant face? He has rarely dealt with women, let alone such a beautiful woman. Wei Liang was inexplicably embarrassed by her eyes, only to feel a hot breath rushing to his face, and he couldn't even speak. Zhang Xuning threw the fishing rod and raised her thin eyebrows. Who told you that I do things for the heavenly sect? Chapter 183, Pure Misunderstanding. As she spoke, she got up from her seat. At this time, I saw that she was wearing a green curly grass pattern Hunan skirt, and when she took a step forward, the skirt swayed like a thin wave of water, and she walked directly to him, pacing around him, looking him up and down. Wei Liang only felt creepy. He did not dare to raise his head when he stood in front of him, and when he stood behind him, his back was as stiff as a stone pillar. Zhang Xuaning's acquaintance with Wei Liang in his last life was purely a misunderstanding. At that time, Shenju, the king of Linzi, had just ascended the throne, and took her to play in Jingzhongfang city, and met a group of deep-eyed and high-nosed merchants who came from the sea, and were peddling some strange-looking fruits on the street. There were a lot of people around, to see the excitement. But there are very few that you have to spend money on. She and Shenju were watching the excitement on the side, but when they were about to leave, they saw a literati who was not tall or strong squeezing through the crowd with great difficulty, came to the merchants, and said that he not only wanted to buy those fruits, but also wanted to buy the seeds of these fruits. So they talked about it, but the price was not negotiated. The man was so angry that his face turned red, and he seemed to be so attached to the fruits and seeds that he stood on the street and refused to go. In the end, Zheng Bao's eyes were sharp, remembering people, and he quietly whispered to Shenju, "Isn't this the Wei Tanhua you handpicked in Jingqing?" Shenju took a serious look at it. Zhang Xuning couldn't help but be surprised. As soon as Shenju pondered, he asked Zheng Bao to relieve this eccentric Tan Hualang, pay the money, and finally let people come over to talk. Shenjuigui is the son of heaven and doesn't remember people, but even if Shenju, who is a flower explorer, doesn't remember what Shenju looks like, he can recognize Zheng Bao who was standing in front of the steps when the Golden Palace was passed on that day, so he immediately came forward to salute. Fortunately, Shenju stopped in time. Then he asked him in great wonder what he wanted to do with all this pile of roche stuff. Wei Liang broke out in a cold sweat on his head, and only said that he had some habits that he couldn't get on the table, and he was used to studying things in the fields, and he hoped that Shenju would not be strange. Shenju glanced at the fruits he was holding in his arms, and shook his head again and again. I don't know if I think this Tan Hualang is not doing his job or has any other ideas, but he didn't punish him after all. He just said, "It's understandable that there are some pastimes outside of business, take it back and study it, I have also paid for it. He wants to really study something in the future, remember to send it to the palace to pay homage. Although I don't like this, the queen is very greedy, and she may love to eat." Zhang Xuning stood behind him, feeling faceless, and wanted to refute, but he couldn't speak, so he could only swallow a sulk in his stomach. Wei Liang sighed as if he had escaped. After that, Shenju and Jiang Xuning returned to the palace, and the matter came to an end. The people in the palace fought with each other, and the ghosts fought with the ghosts, and it didn't take long for her to forget about it. But no one expected that in the midsummer of the following year, she was teaching those starlings to speak under the corridor outside the main hall of Cunning Palace, when she saw the chief administrator of the Internal Affairs Office bringing several eunuchs carrying something. At first glance, it is full of strange-shaped fruits. There was also a spike-covered one that looked like a giant meteor hammer. When I asked, I found out that it was said that a master of the Hanlin Academy called Wei Liang was specially offered, and after asking the emperor, someone sent it to her. Jiang Xuning couldn't remember what happened at all, and as soon as the eunuchs of the Internal Affairs Office left, she studied these fruits with the palace maids for a long time. Some are delicious, and some are not in the right way. In the end, all the attention of the people was on the fruit full of spikes, and when they heard what it was called, they had to open the outer shell and eat the meat inside, so they asked the little eunuch to take a knife and finally open it. Outcome. That smell simply stunned everyone up and down Cunning Palace, making Jiang Xuning unforgettable for life. This thing is said to be edible? She was furious, just thinking that this surnamed Wei looked honest. It turned out that it was even more excessive than those kingly old ministers in the court who opposed her. This was obviously taking the opportunity to humiliate herself. So one day, the emperor of the imperial garden gave a banquet, and Jiang Xuning found an opportunity to bring Wei Liang out to talk alone. Wei Liang didn't seem to be aware of the trouble he had caused, and asked Jiang Xuning how he was eating those fruits. Jiang Xuning almost asked someone to drag him down and behead him. But whatever, this is also the emperor personally ordered Tan Hualang, but it is not her turn to do it blatantly, so she only smiled and told him that she liked what he sent, since he was so concerned about what fruits and vegetables he was doing. It was really a waste to stay in the Hanlin Academy. Why not let him go out and be a parent official with the people, and teach them to farm? She can also help him talk to the emperor. It stands to reason that when any official in the DPRK and China who has a little brain hears this, he will tremble with fright and break out in a cold sweat. Because the words themselves are a clear threat. Staying in the Hanlin Academy is a reserve minister, and most of them can stay in Beijing as officials in the future. Before he got out, he had to be sent to various provinces to be an official, and he was unsatisfactory, a low-level official, and a drudgery. Unexpectedly, after this Wei Liang was stunned, he was full of joy, his eyebrows and eyes were full of light, and even his face was red, and he stumbled and bowed and said, "This, how dare you bother Niang Niang?" At that time, Jiang Xuning really didn't understand what kind of reaction he had. She sarcastically said a few words of praise and derogation, but Wei Liang didn't know whether he was really confused or pretending to be confused, and thought she was praising him, and his smile became brighter and brighter. In the end, Jiang Xuning was confused, seeing that he was not angry at all. He was so annoyed that he brushed his sleeves away. That night, I made a small report to Shenju. Said that Wei Liang was a good person, he was bent on welcoming himself, he was not a good official, so he simply sent it to a remote province, so that he could reflect on it and introspect, and if he loved farming, he would be happy. Shenju couldn't help but comfort her, coax her, and tell her not to be angry. At that time, Jiang Xuning thought that Shenju was still partial to this annoying Tanhua in the end. As a result, I heard the next day that when he was in the court, Shenju directly took Wei Liang out of the Hanlin courtyard with a piece of paper and threw it to Jiao as a county magistrate. Jiang Xuning was happy now. Shenju didn't say anything, and only looked at her and smiled when they ate together at night, asking her if she was happy this time. Jiang Xuning's tail rose to the sky. She thought, with Wei Liang as a lesson from the past, a good Tan Hualang ran to be the county magistrate, and she didn't know how miserable her life was, and she didn't think that anyone else would dare to provoke her in the future. However, only in the past year, when the household department sorted out the taxes of various provinces, it was shocked to find that Jiao County had paid a full double of the land tax and grain compared with last year. For the first time, Jiang Xuning began to suspect that God was deliberately messing with her. The civil and military forces of the Manchu dynasty were shocked by the situation in Jiao County. Some people suspected that he had increased the taxes of the people, and some people suspected that there was an ulterior motive in it. Shenju was naturally surprised and sent someone to investigate. The results of the investigation slapped everyone in the face. People rely on hard skills. Since Jiao County followed the county lord Wei Liang to farm together, 1 acre of land planted 2 acres of rice, and it was his own grain that doubled first, so he paid more grain to the imperial court. Needless to say, Jing Zhong urgently summoned Wei Liang into Beijing. If the increase in rice yield per mu in Jiao County can be extended, wouldn't there be no famine in the great Jianchao dynasty? In those 2 days, Jiang Xuning was extremely worried. Thinking that this Wei Liang has gained power, it is not a good thing for him, and he is thinking about how to deal with this person, but the eunuch of the Internal Affairs office outside is carrying something in a hurry. It was full of 3 baskets of fine Jiao salted duck eggs. The eunuch said that it was Jiao County who ordered Wei Liang to come to Beijing this time to specially ask someone to honor her, specifically to thank the queen for her recommendation back then. Jiang Xuning was simply stunned. For a moment it was difficult to tell whether this was a mockery or a mockery. But in short, Wei Liang didn't seem to be aware of her previous annoyance and malice, and simply engraved her kindness in his heart. So after jumping 3 levels and holding an important position in the household department, he also said that the Queen Mother was a rare good person, and others really misunderstood her too deeply. And at every turn, some fresh melons and fruits were sent to Beijing, and the imperial dining room didn't have to go out to buy them for a while. In this way, Jiang Xuning inexplicably enveloped a capable minister who was regarded by the people as a real food and clothing parent. She couldn't help but think. Others really don't have a misunderstanding of this palace. Wei Liang, you have too much misunderstanding about this palace. But anyway, the pie that fell from the sky was not picked up in vain, and Wei Liang's brain was probably only used for the 2 things of reading and farming, and Yu Chaotang was really not sharp at all. Everyone else thought he was their confidant. Jiang Xuning also had to rack her brains to mediate for the other party, but the other party was reckless and offended people or blocked the way of others, and was counted by others. She had to follow behind as a cow to deal with the aftermath or protect her. Sometimes she wonders, Bangong and Wei Liang, who is the ancestor? In short, over time, this head lacks roots, and he is dead set on her. Whether it was a misunderstanding at the beginning or not naturally doesn't matter. No matter how the situation changes, such a person is the most favored by the superiors and inseparable from the people. So Jiang Xuning thought that even if she collapsed in the previous life, Wei Liang's ending should not be bad. The worst is to go back to the countryside and farm. He likes it anyway. At this moment, Jiang Xuning stared at the other party, and her mood became very complicated, and after a while, she pulled the corners of her lips and smiled innocently. Wei Gongzi, let me ask you. Wei Liang trembled. In the next. Jiang Xuning took out the patience of coaxing fools in the previous life. Who told you? Wei Liang hated to dig a pit and bury himself. Yes, I was worried about this, and no one told me. Jiang Xuning. Don't stop me, I want to beat this man up. Her eyelids jumped several times, and she raised her finger and pressed it gently, only to barely hold onto a kind face that was about to be torn, and praised her incorrectly. Wei Gongzi is really a thoughtful person. Wei Liang didn't hear the meaning of the words, thinking that she was really complimenting. He said, don't dare to be, it's just for the people. If the grains are abundant, but the family and the country are in chaos, won't the gains outweigh the losses? Jiang Xuning took a deep breath. Then you can rest assured, This girl is a lard and does not dare to be with the heavenly sect. Wei Gong's worries are really unfounded. Wei Liang suddenly breathed a sigh of relief. In this way, Wei is too worried. Since the girl from the owner said so, then Wei will also believe it. He untied the account book from his sleeve and handed it over. Only said, "This is the current season's harvest grain account that Wei withheld privately, and I ask the girl to forgive me for my recklessness." The ledger had been tied to his arm, and it still had a wisp of warmth. Zhang Xuning looked at him like a fool. Wei Liang didn't know, is there something wrong? After a long time, Zhang Xuning said faintly, "You came all the way to ask the sentence, what I say, you can believe it, and you don't even want some evidence." Oh. Wei Liang seemed to have just reacted, but to Zhang Xunning's surprise, he didn't ask her for further evidence, but smiled at her, shook his body, and said, "It's not a secret, I don't think the girl is a person who can lie and deceive people." Although the tenants on the Grange had never seen the girl, she never treated them lightly, and did not charge them heavy rent. "I was still in a dilemma when I came down, I just wanted a good person like the girl. If she really worked for the heavenly sect, she didn't know how to choose. Now that you say that you are not a heavenly sect, you dare to believe it now." In his previous life, he was not killed, so he really relied on himself to take care of him behind his back. Zhang Xuning looked at the sky speechlessly. She decided to go back and put a few more capable people to Wei Liang's side, so that he would not be beaten when he went out one day, and then took the stubble with her, and only asked, come here, what kind of tea does Wei Gongzi drink?" Wei Liang hurriedly said, "No, there is still something to do." Zhang Xuning thought about it and said, "But you want to prepare for the autumn festival." Wei Liang was stunned for a moment, as if he was reacting to what autumn harvest was, and then laughed and said, "It doesn't matter if autumn harvest arrives, just take the test, but the rice has been harvested, Wei has to go back and wonder if he can plant some wheat in winter, or try to plant something called a potato, which grows quickly and..." Zhang Xuning felt a kind of weakness from the heart, only to feel that thousands of birds were chirping in her ears, and she was dizzy when she heard it, and she didn't know whether she was in Shu or Jiangning, and she was almost slipping under her feet. After a while, Wei Liang finished speaking. Then he asked Zhang Xuning with a bit of brilliance in his eyes, "How does the girl from the owner look at it?" Zhang Xuning came back to her senses, didn't dare to say that she didn't understand anything, thinking about the routine of dealing with this person in her previous life. She curled her lips and smiled and tried to make herself look very surprised, and said, "I see it very good." Wei Liang immediately became excited, "Then I'll do it when I go back." After speaking, he bowed down and said goodbye and left, and he didn't mean to stay at all. Lianer Tanger looked at her behind. The smile on Zhang Xunning's face instantly fell, and she only asked them, "What did he just say?" The two looked at each other and shook their heads. "Okay, I didn't get it." "Grow whatever you like." Zhang Xuning flipped through the account book handed over by Wei Liang, and only glanced at the numbers written down at the end, but the two thin eyebrows like willow leaves slowly locked. 2 years have passed, and the situation on the Tatar side should also have signs. In terms of doing business, although she is not as good as Yu Bangheng in the previous life, she does not need to bet on both sides to maintain stability with her, and secretly help Yan Lin alone, and the pressure is less than half. I just don't know, is it enough, and is it too late? Chapter 184, 5 Stones. Outside, it was almost evening. It didn't take much time for Wei Liang to go in, and he was full of thoughts about what he wanted to plant when he got back to the field, and the carriage he hired was still waiting outside when he came out. But at this time, there was also an extra carriage outside. He looked up, and he was slightly startled. It was not a very luxurious carriage, but the wood used to make the carriage was excellent, the lacquer was fine, the wood was hard, and the sides were inlaid with carved panes, and there was a curtain on the inside. The handlebar type of the car is also strong. When he glanced at others, there was some sharp light at the bottom of his eyes, and the muscles on his two arms were knotted. Wei Liang was a little curious in his heart, and looked at the carriage twice. It was also a coincidence that someone was getting out of the car. On his body is a turmeric 100 butterflies wearing a pleated skirt with flowers and gold. He is also very young, with a delicate appearance and a calm face, but he seems to have encountered something, and his brows are slightly locked. When I glanced at it, I also saw Wei Liang. Wei Liang didn't know each other. The other party didn't know Wei Liang either. The two of them glanced at each other, but they didn't say hello. They only guessed the relationship between the other party and the owner of the slanted white house. Each nodded, and one got into his carriage, and the other walked towards the courtyard. It wasn't until the carriage recoiled out of Wei Alley and arrived on the street outside, listening to the lively words of the surrounding market, that Wei Liang had a flash of inspiration in his head, and suddenly remembered Shuzhong Ren's family. Although there were no obvious markings on the carriage of the carriage, there were some on the horse. A snowflake-like pattern is printed on the top of the horse's head. That's the mark of the artesian well salt chamber. It was none other than Yu Fangyan. Emperor Shenlang decided 2 months ago that he would make a southern tour next year, along the Grand Canal all the way to Jiangning. Who doesn't know that the heavenly sect has always had deep roots in the south? Everyone guessed that this time they were going to take the opportunity of the southern tour to attack the heavenly sect, so as to show the prestige of the heavens and let the people of Jiangnan have a glimpse of the sky. However, in recent years, although the treasury has not been empty, it is not abundant, and the amount of money spent on a trip to the south to mobilize the army is by no means a small amount. The state treasury can't come up with this money, so naturally it has to ask the people. The banks of the canal should be connected to the holy driver's government, each with its own way. Or to raise taxes on the common people, or to seek collection from the squires. The richest in the south of the Yangtze River are the salt merchants, followed by the big merchants in the rice, cloth, and other industries, and the people in the government who are too lazy to think about the vegetarian meal, and with a stroke of the pen, they sent a letter half a month ago, asking the speakers of the major chambers of commerce to gather in Jinling to discuss how to pay for it. Although Ren's salt farm is in Shuzhong, after Jiang Xuning arrived 2 years ago, he began to invest the surplus silver money in the Jiangnan area, which is the easiest to get rich, or to the merchant ships that travel between the north and the south, or to annex some small and medium-sized salt merchants in Yangzhou, and also took advantage of the relationship with the silk merchants to enter the raw silk and cloth business. Therefore, although the foundation of the Ren family is still in Shuzhong, most of the territory has expanded to the south of the Yangtze River. If you have money in your hand, you can get it faster. Jiang Xuning personally taught them what it means to make money faster, and it is easier to make money when you have money. You don't need money if you lose money when you invest money, but if you succeed more than you lose, and you make more money than you lose, the wealth in their hands will continue to grow. It is not a good thing for the government in this area of Jiangnan to take over, to build a palace, and to find money from salt merchants, but if it is linked to next year's salt introduction, it is a business that you will do if you don't do it and someone else will do it, and if you give up, you will definitely be squeezed out by others. So Yu Fangyan and Ren Weizi are here. It's just that the reason why she visited the oblique White House today was not just to discuss this matter. Before sending Wei Liang away, Jiang Xuning flipped through the account book, and then went to pick up the fishing rod he had set up on the railing. When I took a look at the line, the fish had already eaten the bait. There was only a bare hook left at the end of the line, shining in the light and shadow of the setting sun. Yu Fangyan's footsteps were slightly messy, and before he could go outside the water pavilion, he called, "Second girl." Jiang Xuning looked back at her and was stunned. Why is Fangyan here? After Yu Fangyan married to Shuzhong, although she and Ren Weizi were fake husband and wife, the other party claimed that she would act more seriously, and she really dared to hand over all matters in Ren's family to her, and she didn't let others gossip internally and externally. In this way, the cowardice of the time when he was in Bafa was gradually washed away. Can handle the general affairs and shoulder the responsibility, that is, when talking with people about business, there is no jerky at the beginning, although it is still silent, but it has been a little more practiced. She came to this matter, but when she came to Zhang Swining, she saw the bright face of the second girl with a smile, but she stopped somehow, and after a moment of silence, she said, "Just now we were talking to the people of the Hui Chamber of Commerce and met." Zhang Swining's heart jumped slightly. "Who did you meet?" Yu Fangyan's gaze fixed on her face, and said slowly, "The one in the secluded pavilion, Boss Lu. Lucien." It was really an ominous cold spirit that climbed up her back. Zhang Swining had not heard this name in the past 2 years. After all, Lu Zheyan's business was big, and he also held a large amount of silver shares in Ren Salt Farm, and he was indispensable when he paid dividends at the end of the year. But the two sides can be called the well water and not the river water. She didn't know Lucien, and Lucien never troubled her. Now, for no reason, what kind of business can be talked about with a busy person like him to come to Jinling in person? Others don't know, but she knows better than anyone else. This person is Xie Wei's confidant, eyes and ears, and his right-hand man. In the past 2 years, it has been said that Shen Lang relied on the national teacher and the monk of the circular machine, and he was not as good as before for Xie Wei, the emperor. But Zhang Swining didn't think so. The people outside feel that the circular machine monk is deep because of the dispute between the circular machine monk and the head of the heavenly sect, but Xie Wei's fame and power, one is in the court, the other is in Shilin. Compared with the circular machine monk, it is simply 8 poles that can't be beaten together, and they are all levels that ordinary people can't touch. Where do ordinary people know how this person secretly plans and plans? Was left out in the cold, was placed, stayed away from the center of power, and even went to Wutai Mountain and Sanking Temple to cultivate Buddha and seek immortals. She didn't believe any of these words. Zhang Swining crossed her arms and pondered. Her mood was a little annoyed, and she only frowned and said, "The emperor is going to tour the south next year, and there will definitely be a lot of business opportunities in the south of the Yangtze River. And there hasn't been much action in previous years, so don't worry too much." Yu Fangyan bit her lip. Zhang Swining caught a glimpse of it, sensed that something was wrong, and asked, "Isn't it right?" Yu Fangyan recalled what happened on the cruise ship just now, and said word by word, "In the past, when we met Lucien, we would say hello at most, but this time we met on the Qinhua River, he asked me about the girl's current situation." Zhang Swining's fingertips trembled slightly. "If so, that's really unusual." Asterisk. As night fell, the fishing boats on the Qinhua River were closed, and the beautifully dressed painting boats lit up the bright lanterns with greasy fragrance, reflecting them on the water, gently swaying with the swaying ripples. On the ship, there are vassals and elegant poems to chant, and there are also vulgar and unbearable fists and wines. The sound of silk and bamboo is chaotic, and the red scarf and green sleeves are confusing. Lucien has not returned to Jinling for a long time. Once he revisited Qinhua, he was still the same, full of fragrant powder, although the appearance of the people was not like the old years, but the demeanor between the eyebrows and the thoughts hidden in the smile nest have not changed much. Skinny horses seem to be reserved, but in fact they are waiting for the price to be sold. Wealthy businessmen embrace beauties, but they are thinking about business in their hearts. The merchants of Hui's who are famous all over the world, and they have their own demeanor, but when they get to the city raised by the kings of the 6 dynasties of Jinling, and get on the boat on the Qinhua River that has been floating for thousands of years, the wind is gone, and the bones are soft. The person on the other side raised a glass to him with drunken eyes. Lucien also drank it with a smile, and was about to take this opportunity to win the cloth business this time, and kill the price again, but he saw a small boat break through the ripples and approach the boat, and take the clipper board to the bow of the boat. A clever young man dressed in coarse linen stepped on the plank of the ship and said something to the waiter who was guarding outside the beaded curtain. The waiter nodded, and opened the curtain and entered. Silently walked to Lucien's side and whispered, "Boss Lou, someone came outside, saying that there is an urgent letter from you." When he came back to Jinling, Lucien didn't bring many people. Although he can't see the person outside clearly, he can roughly distinguish the figure of the person, who is the kid who is not Xiaobao. He apologized to the people next to him and got up and walked out. On the river in autumn, the wind was cool and rushed to his face, dispelling the dizzying aroma of fat powder that he had brought out of the boat. Lucien said, "What letter?" Xiaobao has grown taller now, a leather belt is tied around his waist, and he looks very energetic, so he only handed the letter to him, and said, "The secret letter from the border is sealed with fire paint, and no one dares to open it first." From the border? Lucien's eyelids jumped. He didn't bother to speak. He first opened the fire paint on the seal, and then took out the letter and read it. A thin page. But what was written on it really surprised him. Xiaobao looked at him. "Is there going to be a war?" Lucien didn't care to answer him, but asked urgently, "Can this letter be delivered to the capital?" Xiaobao said, "The letter is divided into 3 parts, and it is transmitted to Jiangnan, Huangzhou and Beijing at the same time, and Mr. should have received it." Lucien's eyes flickered, but his expression was not relaxed at all. He looked at the words on the paper again, remembering that person's actions and behaviors in the past 2 years were no different from previous years, but there was a cloud of worry in his heart. He folded the letter and handed it back to Xiaobao. Xiaobao asked, "Is there nothing to explain?" Lucien was silent for a long time, and said, "I'll know when the people come." "People coming?" Xiaobao was stunned. Asterisk. The autumn night in the capital is much colder than that of Qinhua in the south of the Yangtze River. The autumn breeze is blowing in the palace. The unclosed doors slap against each other, sometimes making people feel ghostly. In the side hall of Fengchen Palace, only the bronze crane leaning against the pillar has 2 lamps, and the light and shadow flicker and cast the shadow of the person on the window, but the shape is blurred. On the east wall hangs a piano. In the teacup on the table, the tea has already been cold, reflecting half of the silent face. In the distance, there was the sound of laughter and music outside the window, which was the sound of the harem concubines accompanying the emperor to feast and have fun in the imperial garden. Xie Wei closed his eyes. On the case in front of him was the incriminating evidence of the imperial doctor of the Thai hospital who came to denounce the priest in the palace. 5 porcelain bowls with ice cracks contained 5 kinds of scattered stones, a used porcelain cup on the side, a medicine pestle resting in the corner of the lacquer plate, and a small pile of medicinal powder that had been mixed together was scattered on the front piece of paper. The head of the Thai hospital blushed with a red face and said angrily, as if he was still in his airs, "Wushizan, also known as cold food powder, was originally used to heal the sick, but there is no disease to eat. The body is hot and dry, and the heart has a dream, although it makes people flutter to the fairyland, and the troubles are gone, but they are addicted and difficult to stop, and there is great harm to the body, so that people can stop the wild waves. These Jianghu monks, using this thing to sacrifice to the saint, is absurd. It is simply their hearts can be punished. The heart has a dream, and the troubles are gone." Xie Wei stared at them for too long, and slowly developed a strange feeling of dizziness, as if these bowls twisted and turned into mouths and eyes growing out of the shadows, conveying something to him and telling him. He hadn't slept well in a long time. The wall is thousands of feet, and there is no desire to be rigid. The mind is free of obstacles, there is no terror, away from upside-down dreams, and nirvana. The Taoist Buddhist scriptures and Confucian scriptures have been read over and over again, but there is no way to find liberation in the sea of suffering. Life in the world seems to be a painful ordeal through all kinds of tribulations, but I don't know if I forget myself. If this body is destroyed, can I be solved? No one knew that this emperor had been swimming on the edge of the bottomless abyss for a long, long time. His pale fingers were dyed yellow by the shaking flames, and Xie Wei reached for the paper in front of the lacquer plate, on which the milled five-colored powder was mixed together, and it was difficult to distinguish. Pull to the front, light, and flutter without weight. He paused for a moment, finally dipping his ring finger in a little and staring at it for a long time. There was a knock at the door outside. The little eunuch said outside, "Young master, the secret letter from the border pass, come in a hurry." Xie Wei shook his head. Only then did he wake up from a dream, grabbed a jinpsa next to him, wiped his hands, and said lightly, "Come in." Chapter 185, Indecent Assault. Lucien was also a scholar and a first. When Yu Fangyin was still angry and bullied in Bafu, he was already a well-known owner of the Yuan Pavilion in the capital, and the rest of his money was secretly running various businesses. Now that 2 years have passed, Yu Fangyin has certainly become the leading businessman in Shu together with Ren Weizi, and even runs many other industries with Zhang Suining. After all, in the past 2 years, in this big loss and big win business, they have strangely never fought with Lucien, and they have never even had a little friction. Yu Fangyin looked at Zhang Suining, and couldn't help but say with some concern, "This Qinhua banquet is actually led by the government, and it is related to next year's salt introduction. Although we had no conflict with Lucien in the past and avoided many losses, we didn't know anything about his details. Girl, if he..." Zhang Suining came back to his senses when he heard this. No one knew that this emperor had been swimming on the edge of the bottomless abyss for a long, long time. His pale fingers were dyed yellow by the shaking flames, and Xie Wei reached for the paper in front of the lacquer plate, on which the milled five-colored powder was mixed together, and it was difficult to distinguish. Pull to the front, light, and flutter without weight. He paused for a moment, finally dipping his ring finger in a little and staring at it for a long time. There was a knock at the door outside. The little eunuch said outside, "Young master, the secret letter from the border pass, come in a hurry." Xie Wei shook his head. Only then did he wake up from a dream, grabbed a jinpsa next to him, wiped his hands, and said lightly, "Come in." Chapter 185, Indecent Assault. Lucien was also a scholar and a first. When Yu Fangyin was still angry and bullied in Bafu, he was already a well-known owner of the Yuan Pavilion in the capital, and the rest of his money was secretly running various businesses. Now that 2 years have passed, Yu Fangyin has certainly become the leading businessman in Shu together with Ren Weizi, and even runs many other industries with Zhang Suining. After all, in the past 2 years, in this big loss and big win business, they have strangely never fought with Lucien, and they have never even had a little friction. Yu Fangyin looked at Zhang Suining, and couldn't help but say with some concern, "This Qinhua banquet is actually led by the government, and it is related to next year's salt introduction. Although we had no conflict with Lucien in the past and avoided many losses, we didn't know anything about his details. Girl, if he..." Zhang Suining came back to his senses when he heard this. Ren Weizi's face turned pale when he heard this. "One day, I poured myself a pound of wine, knocked on the door and asked Yu Fang to come out, confessed his heart, and said that the two had become relatives, and there was nothing uncomfortable in living during this time. In the past year, Yu Fangyin hadn't thought about it. It's all about business." When Ren Weizi said this, she was naturally overwhelmed on the spot. These two are also interesting. Zhang Suining later asked her how to deal with it. Yu Fangyin stammered, "I don't know if I like him. I never thought about this in the past, but for more than a year, I know that although he doesn't stay up all night in business, he is a good person. So I didn't leave for the time being, and with him, try again, try and see. In the past year, the two have obviously become a lot closer. Ren Weazi looked at her sincerely. It's because Zhang Xuning has such a joke at this moment, no matter what kind of virtue Lucien is, when he meets Ren Weazi, who protects his wife, he can't please keep it. While the two were talking, they came outside to report that Boss Ren looked at the evening and came to pick up people in person. Yu Fangyan naturally blushed again. Zhang Xuning knew that she was thin-skinned and didn't say much, so she simply asked about business, and then told her to go back and pick a few capable shopkeepers and a capable shopkeeper under her hand, and go to Weiliang to keep an eye on it, so she urged her to go out quickly, so as not to wait for Ren Weazi for a long time. Asterisk. In recent days, rich businessmen and magnates have gathered in Jinling, and the Qinhua River has been singing every night. Obviously it is autumn, but it is more lively than summer. Some acquaintances who are in a hurry will meet them at every meeting. After Yu Fangyan talked to Zhang Xuning once, she did not deliberately avoid socializing for the next 3 days, but went to the banquet with Ren Weazi, but did not meet Lucien again, and she still asked this person in her heart, maybe if she didn't wade into this troubled water, she had already left Jinling. I didn't expect to hit the right one at the banquet today. At that time, she was listening intently to several medicinal herb merchants from Shaanxi and Gansu sitting next to her talking about the border pass. Since Her Royal Highness the eldest princess went down to make peace, Dakian and Tatar have really opened a mutual market, and Tatar has a lot of good medicinal materials. But you also know that it's a bitter cold place, and there's not much big business to do. I didn't think that this year I had a lot of luck, and I was worried that I couldn't sell a lot of medicinal materials, but I met a young man, who looked handsome, and I didn't know which one was the son of a giant, so I opened my mouth to wrap it up, although the profit is thin, but it can sell a lot, which made me come back earlier, and I can also prepare some medicinal materials for next year. He said that there is always a shortage of medicine, so I will return it next year. You have 20,000 silver for that medicinal herb, buy it too, it's generous. Who's to say it's not? Alas, you can't mention the border pass. Why is my brother so sad? Hey, I've been holding back this for a long time. We know a few doctors who make medicinal materials, and in the past 2 years, the mutual market has opened medical skills and spread them to Tatar, and a few people have gone to the Tatar royal court. The shopkeeper of my house, who had a young man's brother working in the palace, came back to tell me that His Highness seemed to be pregnant after 2 years of marriage to Tatars. Wow. The surroundings were suddenly shocked, and Yu Fangyan couldn't hold back and looked back. Everyone was puzzled. Isn't it a good thing to be pregnant? The man sneered and said, what do you know? The Tatar King Yanda is in the prime of life, and although he is married to a princess, where does he put a weak woman in his eyes? Where is the princess and the pro? It is clearly humiliated. The others looked at each other and couldn't help but sigh. Yu Fangyan was shocked when she heard this, and she wanted to ask if this person's news was reliable, but it was difficult to speak in front of so many people at the banquet. She ate absent-mindedly at one meal. Ren Weazi sat next to her and picked up vegetables for her, and quietly asked her what was wrong, and out of the corner of her eye, she caught a glimpse of the businessman who had just told the news going out, so she explained in a low voice, and got up to go out. She was worried about the rumors that it was closed over there, and when she left her seat, she didn't see a person in the corner who saw her go out, and then put down the wine glass in her hand and followed. He had only gone up the corridor and followed the man a few steps, when he heard laughter from behind. Someone said happily in the back, the banquet is only halfway, and boss, you left the table in a hurry. I can't see that I care so much about the news at the border gate. Isn't it also about to get involved in the medicinal materials business? This sounds familiar. Yu Fangyan's heart tightened, and when he turned his head, he saw Lucien. Wearing a literati gown, although he is doing a copper-smelling business, he has never been willing to treat himself badly in his posture, and he will always have the fragrance of pen and ink. It's a pity that the little bit in his eyebrows feels a little shrewd, which is just the opposite of Renwiazi. She stopped and became vigilant. Boss Lu is also here. Lucien hasn't left Jinling in the past few days, only thinking about Jing Hong's reaction after receiving the letter, and taking care of some things. Today I heard that Renwiazi and Yu Fangyan were coming, so they also came. He approached and said, "A few days ago, I wanted to talk to Boss Yu, but I didn't want you to give you any face, and I didn't want to say more than half a word, but it made Lu a little sad. It's rare to encounter today, I don't know if I can empty it." Yu Fangyan took a step back. Today is a banquet, other people's mansions, it's really not suitable for talking about business. I also have something to do, Boss Lu, please another day. Lucien didn't take it seriously. It's not about business. Yu Fang groaned, "It's not business, it's a private matter. Please also ask Boss Lu for forgiveness. The concubine is a married woman, and it is really inappropriate to have private dealings with people in addition to business, and please pay attention to Boss Lu. Don't talk about business, don't talk about private matters." Lucien looked sleek on his face, but he was arrogant, and he even had to fight hard when he encountered Xie Wei in the entrance examination, and it was only later that he was convinced to do things for him. But if you change someone else, it will be difficult for him to look at it. He rarely puts anyone in his eyes. Hearing Yu Fangyan's prevarication of Renwiazi, he let a playful smile hang on his lips, and said, "What is the relationship between Boss Yu and Ren Gongzi? And the drama between husband and wife is a little real and a little false. Boss Yu knows it in his own heart. Why do you have to say secret words in front of the Ming people?" Yu Fangyan never expected that her relationship with Lucien would be broken by this person. She tensed up and took another step back. But the rear is already a corner, and there is no way to retreat. She said, "Boss Lu's words are incomprehensible. Ren Gongzi and I are the husband and wife of Ming media." Lucien was impatient to go around in circles with her, and only said, "I want to see your owner." At this moment, Yu Fangyan's pupils constricted. Lucien was originally straight to the point, and he did have something to find Zhang Xuning, but as soon as he finished speaking, when he raised his eyes, he felt that the girl in front of him had suddenly changed, as if she had suddenly changed a person, and there was a little more vigilance and hostility like a young beast protector in her eyes when she looked back at her. A bad feeling suddenly swept over me. Before he could react, Yu Fangyan turned his head and shouted in the direction of the flower hall on the other side of the corridor, "Indecent! Indecent! Indecent!" Lucien was simply frightened, and the calm people who had always laughed at the collapse of Mount Tai and looked at the sea coldly were all panicked by this sudden word. Thinking that although Lucien is a beast, he is also a beast. There has never been such a thing as an indecent girl. If she screams, will it be worth it? Therefore, he completely subconsciously took a step forward to restrain Yu Fangyan, stretched out his hand to cover her mouth, shocked and angry. "Why have I ever insulted you?" Yu Fangyan became the calmest one. She looked directly at Lucien, and the meaning was self-evident. Only then did Lucien realize that his hand had been pressed to the side of the person's lips, and the soft lipstick rubbed against the palm of his hand, which made him want to retract his hand for a moment. But seeing Yu Fangyan like this, and worried that she would let go of her hand, she continued to slander herself, screaming and shouting to attract others. The bruises almost burst on his forehead. Lucien took a deep breath and said, "I let go of my hand, and I also ask Miss Yu not to spew blood anymore." Yu Fangyan blinked. Lucien let go of her. Yu Fangyan didn't move, stared at him and said, "I do things for the girl, and the girl is far away from Shu, just because she doesn't want to cause trouble. Even if Boss Lu has something, he will talk to me in the future. It doesn't matter if he bothers me, if he wants to pester the girl, he will shout like a man when he sees me. Lu Xiankai nodded. Yu Fangyan reminded lightly, people are coming, Boss Lu should leave quickly. Lu Xian looked back, and the figure in the flower hall was really flickering. He was really anxious and annoyed. Even if he wanted to say something and even want to scold, he couldn't find the time to exit, so he hurriedly threw down a sentence, "Count you ruthless," and quickly slipped away first. When they were far away, they heard a commotion in the hallway. Yu Fangyan whispered softly to the people that it was a tall young man who hid in the flowers, startled her, and had already run to the east. Lu Xian was so angry that his head was smoking. The master said, "Well, but women and villains are difficult to raise. When I met by chance at the Shuxiang Inn, she was still a little girl who endured humiliation and anger in Qingyu and Bafu, but now she has changed, she has money, she has potential, and she has her heart and eyes. You can say such indecent things. It's been by Zhang Xuaning's side for a long time, isn't this? Close to Zhu is red, close to ink is black.